There's been a lot of finger pointing within the party over the summer, a lot of dissatisfaction with the leadership. People don't think they're being listened to. Concerns over the spending choices that are coming at Holyrood. It's not the backdrop, is it, for a reset?
Actually, I was there today when the party began it. Actually, it didn't begin it. It began it on the 5th of July, but when the party gathered for a sort of review this morning of what happened, it was incredibly candid. It was at times, quite hard. It was sometimes quite difficult listening to, but it was actually very refreshing. I think John Swinney and his leadership have, across the summer, been around the country with candidates that lost, campaigns that lost. They've been listening to the party. They were doing it again this morning, and I think by the end of this morning's session, there was a bit of a coming together. Everyone had kind of had their say. Everyone had got their points across. Everyone felt they'd been heard, or at least the room that I was in, it felt like everybody had been heard. And I think by the end of the session, everyone was kind of right. We know we've got a job of work to do. The party knows it's got a lot to do internally and externally in government to get back on track, but a determination to do that. And I was quite surprised how upbeat the conference was.
How long will that last? Because it is a very broad tent, the SNP. It brings together lots of different political views. And the glue that kept it together was the push for independence. If you only have 9 seats at Westminster, if things don't look rosy in 2026, how cohesive is the party?
I think, the party's had, obviously, a number of issues over the last year, 2 years, and it has reduced in size. But what is there now, the group that I saw this morning was a very cohesive group. They're not about to just give up and cede the fact that the SNP is in government. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I'm not sure we ever grasped how to manage 125,000 members. No, but what you need now, and it was a real workmanlike tone this morning, what you need now are people who are going to reform the party internally, and there was a real sense this morning that they were up for that. In government, they really need to work out how to protect public services and protect what the SNP's delivered that is unique, the social contract with the people of Scotland that doesn't exist in the rest of the UK, that's now under threat because of this
might be difficult to protect the public services because the Fiscal Commission in Scotland says they've given away a load of money on public sector pay deals, so they don't have any money left.
This is part of the challenge, and it goes back to what I was saying to Chris earlier. Under the Conservatives, most of the time the SNP's been in government, we've had either austerity as a result of the financial crash or austerity under the Conservatives. I think there was reason to hope that might change, as we were told, under Labour. It's not. So now a government that doesn't actually know how much money it's got this year, because Rachel Reeves hasn't told it yet, has to go and work out how to pay public sector pay deals, which it should pay because public servants have deserved those pay deals.
Okay.
I think the basic problem is, and I don't think you can get away from it, is you have a record now.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember that the Scottish education system was absolutely the best in the UK. It nowhere is now in the same way. The NHS in Scotland gets a lot more money, but the results
are very... So you're saying however big the reset, they're bound to their records since 2000,
they've been empowered,
as are the Tories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that dragged us down at the last election, and I think it's almost inevitable now. The SNP, not least the terrible drugs record.
Is it easier to reset, from a Conservative perspective, is it easier to reset when you're out in the wilderness, you're away from government, whereas, obviously, SNP still has a job to do at Holyrood and will for the next 2 years?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's ministers that government is incredibly hard. No one who's been outside of government realises the pace of events, and to rethink, which I think the SNP does probably need to do, just as my party, frankly, needed to do, is very hard to reinvent yourself.
There's a big opportunity here, though, isn't there, for Labour in Scotland? Obviously, it was a really good election result north of the border, but when you look to 2026, there might be people who have lost trust in the SNP who say, look, if we elect a Labour leadership in Scotland, we'll have more power in Westminster.
I think obviously we'll be looking forward to those elections, as we always do, but ultimately the problem that we've seen in the SNP, I think Tim's right, is quite similar to what we've seen with the Conservatives. It is just that sort of chaos and cronyism that's caused them all of those problems. But also, I think you can talk about that. But also, I think the big issue for the party has been there has been too much focus on independence and not the bread and butter issues of just how you run the country competently and effectively. And they need to get back to that. And I say this, I'd love to win those elections in 2026. But in the meantime, we've got to get the economy growing, and that means all of the economy growing right across the country, in Scotland as well as the rest of the UK. And we just want to make sure in the coming years.
So this is one of the key issues that will come. The Scottish elections are about 18 months away. 18 months is a good test of how Labour are doing, and so what the Scottish electorate will be doing is looking at how has the SNP done and how is the new Labour government doing. Labour in Scotland have not been accountable for anything for a very long time.
The strange thing
They
is
don't
that your
remember how.
fortunes are actually entwined, aren't they? Because Rachel Reeves has to set the budget and the spending, and you have to do something with it.
Yeah, and at the moment, like I said, the Scottish Government's in a position where, because of what Rachel Reeves announced a week ago and what Keir Starmer was saying yesterday, the Scottish Government's trying to work out how to spend money this year when it doesn't know how much it's got, and we're almost halfway through the year. That's a ridiculous situation to be in.
How serious is the investigation, and how much does that overshadow what the party's trying to do?
I mean, it's not a day-to-day presence. You can't deny, no one in the SNP could deny that it wasn't an issue during the election. It casts a bit of doubt over the party. No one really knows what's going on in it. No one knows when it's going to end.
Forever. It's taken forever.
You know, and I think there's a fair amount of disgruntlement in
Yeah.
the SNP and amongst the public, because people don't have answers, because people don't know what's going on. And, you know, the sooner that is over for the SNP, however it ends, the better.
Okay, we're going to change the subject entirely. There's a new